Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing an album battle. We've got Motley Crue, not the debut, sorry, the debut album with their new vocalist, but the 1994 self-titled album versus Vince Neil and his debut solo album. Thanks, Trevor. So I've got Trevor Knight from Krash Kourse Metal Show here to help me with this. I thought it's not going to be much of an album battle. It's just my opinion. So we'll bring Trevor in here to give us his thoughts. How you going, Trevor?
Good. It's going great, man. How is Rock and Metal Invasion World over here? How's it going, Steve? Thank you for having me on.
Oh no, it's good, going good. Yeah, no, always good to have a guest. And I've been on your show, of course, and we talked about one of my favorite subjects, hair metal, and
Yep.
just we did a sort of a bit of an intro. If we were introducing someone to hair metal, what would be some albums that we would recommend? Just a couple of albums each. So if you haven't checked that out, go and check out Trevor's channel. I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, he's got some great content in there. Like you've been doing some great interviews, and you got your mailbag where you sort of show people what you've added to your collection. So yeah, lots of good
Yeah,
content.
thank you very much, Steve. And I'm glad to be here to return the favor, basically.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
couldn't and you put up some great stuff. Some really like I always gravitate towards the channels like yours and even like mine where we talk about more of the stuff that non-mainstream, the underground
Oh
type stuff,
yeah.
the stuff that you
Mm.
don't hear on the radio 24/7. So and I always love checking out channels like that. So keep up the good work, brother.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Oh no, there's. I mean, like we're doing a little. We're going a little mainstream today, aren't we? Motley Crue, Vince
A
Neil,
little bit.
a little bit. But then at the same time as well, these were not big albums, right? These are not the ones
Mhm.
that necessarily everyone has in their collection. So it's a little bit off the mainstream. And of course, we're talking 1993, 94, right? So a few years earlier, these bands or this sort of type of sound was definitely in the mainstream, but it was 1993, 94. It was starting to become less popular, right? So
Mhm.
but anyway, it's not about popularity. It's just about our opinions, what we think about these albums. Now, I'll get just. I'm sure you know the backstory, Trevor, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this video do. But basically, Vince and the band they had a bit of a disagreement. I don't even know. Like I've watched. Well, I've read the dirt. I've watched the dirt. I've read autobiographies by different members of the band. It's all a bit. So I'm still confused exactly what happened there.
Yeah.
Anything like you can shed on? Did Vince leave, or was he
I
told to leave?
I mean, you do get a different story every like 5 years and every
Yeah,
interview that they do.
yeah.
But I mean, just from like the Motley Crue side of things, I guess like after Dr. Feelgood, Motley Crue wanted to like take a couple weeks off and record and like have like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off type deal.
Mm.
And eventually, I guess they just butted heads, Motley Crue and Vince Neil. And John Corabi actually apparently Nikki Sixx liked John Corabi's band at the time, which
Mm.
is the Scream here,
Mm.
which was
Mm.
where everyone knows of John Corabi
Mm.
originally. And apparently their managers knew each other, and that's kind of how John Corabi got his foot in the door. So I mean, yeah, but as like the actual like what was the final nail in the coffin to what split Motley Crue, I guess
Mm.
it could be anyone's guess, really.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And it's all happy family supposedly now. They're all back together, and but I don't know.
Well, except for
It's a bit
Mick
of
now,
money
I
talk.
guess, but
Money talks, too.
yeah,
I'll, I'll put up with you if you pay me enough money. Uh,
exactly.
yeah. So, yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Well, yeah, there was something I wanted to add, but anyway, it'll come back to me, I'm sure. Oh yeah, no, one thing I did want to add. I actually thought, I just get your opinion on this. I thought
Mhm.
the like Primal Scream, that song that they had done for Decadence was fantastic. So I thought they
Yeah.
were heading in a really cool direction. I was quite looking, I was looking forward to it at the time. I was like, oh, that's such a killer song. Looking forward to the new album. So it's a shame that yeah, maybe they didn't manage to stick it together and do a new album with Vince. But what were your feelings on
I
that?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that because I literally bought Decade of Decadence
Mm,
just a couple years ago just for the songs Angela and
yeah,
Primal Scream.
yeah,
I love that. Like Primal Scream is one of
yeah,
Motley Crue's one of
it
my
is.
favorite Motley Crue songs.
Yeah.
So yes,
Mm,
it and that's kind of like I always preach this. Like my favorite era of hair metal is
mm,
like the 89 to
mm.
like 92, 93
Yeah,
style,
sure.
and that's exactly what Primal Scream and
Yeah.
Angela kind of sound like.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm right with you on that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just yeah, there was some couple good songs there. So anyway, wasn't to be. So let's kick it off then with our review or what our feelings on the Vince Neil Exposed album. What do you think, Trevor?
All right. So first and foremost, we have a little bit of a super group here, if you
Mm,
will. And now you can argue that uh like Robbie Crane's on here. He's credited, but he doesn't actually show up like musically. He doesn't play an instrument
right.
necessarily on the album.
Mm,
And if anyone's familiar with the band Beggars and Thieves, Susan, I believe, he and Vince had some kind of like relationship, friendship or something, and Vince kind of asked him to help him write this album.
mm,
And Suzanne kind of got like upset that he wasn't allowed to play on the album, so they kind of had a little bit of a fight there. So you have like obviously Steve Stevens on here, and
mm,
for me, I mean, I like Steve Stevens a lot, but you know, I'll kind of get to my verdict of this album, but
mm,
like just from the start here, like just me explaining all this, and then you have Vicky Fox on drums from
mm,
Enough's Enough.
mm,
So you do kind of have like this like super group of some
mm,
sorts of the hair metal genre,
mm,
and one can argue that it doesn't work, one can argue that it does, but yeah, I mean, I kind of get like so. I guess I'll just jump in real quick here with I kind of it, I have to force myself to listen to this album. It's I do not like it. I had this album here for at least 3 4 years now, and I man like I didn't listen to it. I listened to it maybe a couple times when I first picked it up, and it was sitting on my shelf until you asked me, "Hey, let's do a Vince Neil and 94 album here." And I was like, okay. I mean, it's been a while. Maybe it grew on me, and always stuff always grows on me. Because even the '94 Motley Crue album even grew on me from when I first listened to it like
yeah,
10 years ago.
yeah.
So, but this just didn't grow on me. And then you have
Mm,
obviously Vince Neil. Now Vince Neil is like the David Lee Roth of the hair metal scene. Like he back in the day, he was the man. Like technically, technically wise, no, he's not the greatest singer that hair metal has to offer. But on this album, I'm looking here, and we had 4 singles off this album. And honestly, okay, you had "You're Invited but Your Friend Can't Come." That's probably the biggest one.
yeah.
You had "Sister of Pain." "Can't Change Me" is kind of like a little bit of a ballad.
Mm,
"Can't Have Your Cake." Honestly, Steve, out of the 4, what did there really even need to be 4 singles, to be honest with you? But it's since it's Vince Neil, they're gonna push this.
yeah.
And and to give people a little bit of context as well, in 1993, you had not so much like it every week there wasn't a hair metal release like it was back in 91, 90, 89, and even earlier. So like kind of what he was up against was, retroactive Def Leppard, Bump Ahead Mr. Big, like Face the Heat Scorpions, Bad Image, Kingdom Come, like that kind of stuff. Even like Violent New Breed from Shotgun
Mm,
Messiah. They
mm,
went even in a total different direction.
mm,
But
mm,
it sounded good though. It sounded kind of natural for Shotgun
mm,
Messiah. But for Exposed here, man, I just don't all the 4 of those singles I just named. Maybe Can't Change Me, I would probably put onto the iPod. But like I honestly cannot find a song on here that caught my attention out of
mm,
the 4 or 5
mm,
times I listened to this album this week.
mm,
I don't know what's gonna go on the iPod, if anything. And
mm,
I don't want to because I want to give credit where credit's due because I love Steve Stevens. I
mm,
mean, I have his solo album here. I
Mm,
absolutely love the Atomic Playboys that he
mm,
did. And I just kind of wish Steve Stevens just would have been like, hey, Vince, I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to do another,
mm,
Atomic Playboys. But,
mm,
this album kind of flopped the
mm,
Atomic Playboys. So I understand why he
mm,
went with Vince.
mm,
Good money or good business decision, I guess.
mm,
But yeah, Steve, I just can't find anything on here that brings me back. Great, yeah, there's good guitar work. I mean, and then even like Vicky Fox, the drummer, he left. They got in a fight at
mm.
some point on tour for stealing
Yeah.
equipment. So like you had this total revolving door, and so it just okay. It's a super group, yes, but it to me this just does not work. It kind of just sounded forced. Hey, I'm Vince Neil. I don't even write some of the stuff on the album. I leave it to, Suzanne from Beggars and Thieves and I mean, he's a great writer, but Vince, it just kind of feels like, hey, this is the last hurrah, and I'm going to just show my buddy or my ex buddies from Motley Crue that, hey, I can still headline arenas and stuff just by myself, and the
Mm,
spotlight's on me. So, I mean, but I want to give credit where credit's due because I do appreciate in 1993 the scene was changed. This
mm.
came out in April of 93. So the
Yeah.
scene was totally different at that time. And even at the point of recording this in 92, it was changed. But I do appreciate them sticking to this style of music and not changing with the times. I do appreciate that. I will always give it credit for that. But man, I just like I said, I just cannot find anything on here, Steve, that I will take home with me, if that makes sense. So I guess for me, man, I gotta get the rating for this. I gotta give it maybe like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. I don't like to do that. I don't like to say that because I do appreciate that they were still like putting out solid quality sounding music at the time. But man, I there's just nothing here. Lyrically, there's nothing here that I like. It just sounds fake to an extent. I mean, sure, yeah, it's all party stuff. I mean,
Mm,
we're all used to that in hair metal, but it to me it just sounds so discombobulated a little bit. Production's fine, I guess, but
mm.
yeah, Steve, I don't want to hog the floor here. I know I said a lot, but I just feel like the sound kind of does nothing for me. So I got to give it like a 5 or a 6 out of 10.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I'm a little bit surprised because I was thinking, oh, this will be the one. This is because of the two, the Vince one's the more hair metal one, right? When you agree, it's the
Yeah.
more,
Yep.
yeah. So, um, I just had a feeling that perhaps you were actually we're gonna really love it. So interesting. But and actually we're on a similar sort of way of thinking or similar.
Okay.
It's not so much necessarily way of thinking, but I think the way you discovered this album is similar to me. Like you had it, and then you didn't really play it much, And I'm certainly was like that with the Vince album. So I was obviously I'm interested. I'm excited. It's especially in '93. It's like you listed. You can pretty much list the hair metal type bands or hard rock type bands who were releasing albums in '93. It's like there's five
Right.
or six or something like that. There's hardly any, right? Especially on major labels. So you didn't have a lot to choose from. So it's pretty exciting, pretty interesting. I will say that my excitement was subdued a little bit when I heard the first single. You're invited, but your friend can't come. And I was like, yeah, it was on the Encino Man soundtrack.
Soundtrack. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I was like, it's okay, but um, it it didn't, like we talked about loving Primal Scream. It was like, that's nothing like that. Not the quality of that sort of song,
Hmm.
or even as good as some of the better songs from Doctor Feelgood. So, but I was thinking, oh well, whatever. It's just a soundtrack song. That might not be the best song on the album. It's just sort of it's an intro sort of thing. Um, yeah, and actually that song uh, got re-recorded too. So on the album, it's a slightly different version, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think on the Japanese version of this album, there's two different versions. Yeah,
yeah,
you're correct.
right, okay, yeah. So I think actually it's basically the Damn Yankees band that are playing on it, and because Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw, they wrote
Mhm.
the song with Vince, and I think it's them who
Okay.
play on the initial version of the song. and then once they do the album, then they re-record it. But so yeah, I've actually got a vinyl copy of it, which for an album
Oh,
I don't,
nice.
yeah, I don't actually necessarily love. It's there's not too many, probably too many people have a vinyl copy of it. It's not easy to get. Just lucky to pick it up quite a few years ago. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I'll give you my thoughts. I've probably already given a little bit away, but yeah. So initially, not that excited by the first song. But the second single, Sister of Pain, so which is pretty much the lead off single once the album was released, I thought that's a really good song. I actually could imagine this on Dr. Feelgood.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I think I could imagine that one. Vince, I think on this album sounds like Vince. It sounds like Motley Crue Vince. I'm hearing this. I've heard some people say, "Oh, this is like the lost Motley Crue album," and I don't know if I'd go that far because I think there's a lot of elements missing, that
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's true.
yeah. If it was a Motley Crue album, it would be down. It would be down quite low, but that's not necessarily making it on my rankings. Not necessarily a bad making it a bad album, because I really love the Motley Crue albums, right? So it's just there's some great albums it's competing with.
Mhm.
But yeah, it wouldn't be in the top tier. But anyway, so yeah, I thought that wasn't too bad. The first single, Sister Pain, it's got a cool music video as well. You can tell there's a lot of money being put behind this. Like you said, it's like
Yes.
a super group. Yeah. So what's interesting as well. It's 1993. Bands are beginning to change their sound. Yeah, there they are. Bands are beginning to change the sound, but Vince doesn't change at all. This is like, for me, could have come out in 1987, 88. This is
Yeah.
the lyrics are pretty much hair metal type lyrics. The music is,
Mhm.
going to the opening song, "Look in Her Eyes," which is when you first the first song on the album. I mean, honestly, if you hadn't told me it was Vince Neil, I might have thought this was an Atomic Playboys album, a Stevie Stevens album, because he's like letting rip on that song, and it's
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
But it's like, who's
Yep.
supposed to be the star here? Steve Stevens or Vince Neil? Because it's yeah, and this is what I noticed. My the things that I will say that are positive about this album. Uh, Steve Stevens sounds awesome. I just think his guitar playing is yeah, fantastic.
I agree.
Really ripping. Fine Fine Wine. Check that one out. That's got some great shredding guitar from Steve Stevens. And I really like the song "The Edge" as well. And again, Steve Stevens, a nice little riff starts that off. Yeah, it's kind of builds really nicely. That song's actually got a hook, but like you sort of said, a lot of these songs, they're just not catchy. They're not memorable. They're just missing those hooks. And I think that's, again, going back to Motley Crue,
Mhm.
I don't know if it's Nikki Sixx, his songwriting ability, but he can write a hit song, or he can write a song that's just hooks you, it's like, oh yeah.
Right. Yep.
And yeah, there he is.
Yeah. I,
And
to to
they,
to your
they're just
to your
missing
point,
that.
real quick. Sorry, I
Yeah.
cut you off, Steve. To your point there, real quick. Yeah, Nikki Six, he can write like, to me. I kind of get with Exposed here, like a girls, girls, girls vibe album.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Mm.
that's what I kind of compare it
Mm.
to, because I am not a fan of Girls, Girls,
No,
Girls.
me
I think
neither.
that's not a
Mm.
very good album other than the
Mm.
singles. And
Mm.
I think that's kind of like what you get here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I kind of forgot to mention that, but
Yeah.
to your point though, yeah, I kind of put that in like with the Girls, Girls, Girls sound. But if you love that album, like if you love Girls, Girls,
No,
Girls, I
no,
think
that's
you'll
a
enjoy
really
it.
that is a totally again we're on totally the same page there. It's a really good point that a lot of the songs on here sound like those songs that, like you say, weren't released as singles on Girls, Girls, Girls. Like I love Wild Side, and Girls, Girls,
Mhm.
Girls is fun, but yeah,
Yep.
Wild Side's a killer song, but one of my favorite Motley Crue songs. But yeah, there's certainly no Wild Side on this album. But yeah, it's just like like you say, a lot of songs that could have, that I could, have imagined on the Girls, Girls, Girls album. Yeah, or even the Doctor Feelgood, but some of the
Mhm.
lesser songs on there. But um, yeah, I can understand why "Can't Change Me" was released. I think the second single it's a ballad that did actually have some potential. He's got Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw. Again, the guys from Damn Yankees again helping out with the songwriting on that one.
Right.
So yeah. What's interesting too with because I've got this on vinyl, the track listings in a different order to the CD. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's a little bit different. Also, I only just discovered this yesterday when I was sort of playing this and doing a little bit of research. Is because it's vinyl, it's missing a song, so it doesn't have "Set Me Free." I was like, oh, I don't have that song. So that's actually the
Okay.
song. I think on the CD it opens up side 2. Is that right?
It's right in the middle. It's right in the
Yeah,
middle here
right.
of the album.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well,
So,
of course, on a CD it wouldn't have a side 2, but that's right. Yeah, so right in the middle. But
yep.
yeah, so I don't even have that song. I was like, oh, I don't even know that song. So I thought, oh, this is cool. It's like a bonus track I didn't know about. So I played that, which actually it turns out it's a cover song. It's a cover of a Sweet song.
Hmm.
Um, it's all right, But another thing too that I didn't know that I discovered yesterday, and you'll discover this as well if you look at your CD, is there's a song on here called "Getting Hard." And the
Yeah.
lyrics, if you read your inner sleeve, don't match up to the song. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. So the chorus is right. The lyrics for the chorus are right, but everything else, I don't know what those lyrics are for, but they are not the lyrics for the song. So maybe I don't know if the lyrics got changed, but they didn't bother to change the lyrics when they sent off the lyrics to the people who make the inserts and inner sleeves and so forth. So that was pretty bizarre. But
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, like I say, for me the guitar work is great. Steve Stevens, I think, probably shreds more on this than he did even on Atomic Playboys. And yeah, I mean, it sounds good. Production's pretty good. Ron Neverson. He did. Well, he's produced work mainly. He's mainly known, I guess, for Heart, what he did with them. He's quite a
Hmm.
commercial producer, but you know, um, I think I think a lot of people would appreciate the fact that at least Vince has stayed with his sound. He did, unlike Motley
Right.
Crue, as we're about to talk about, where they kind of detour a little bit and go off in a slightly different direction. He's really stuck with his sound. But Trevor, it's like in 1993, 94, this kind of sound was really starting to get out of favor. It just wasn't. And so,
Correct.
of course, and then Vince probably realizing this, and of course, like you say, he loses most of the band anyway, probably everyone actually. For his second album,
Yeah.
he's got a totally new band, and then he starts getting into the sound that's happening at the moment. He gets a bit more alternative, gets a little bit more industrial sort of thing.
Right.
So yeah, I I did enjoy playing it yesterday when I was sort of revisiting it. Not, I played it from time to time, of course. I did enjoy it, but didn't love it. I'm going to give it a 5, similar to you actually. You said 5 or 6. I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely good to have in your collection. But and this is another thing that people might find surprising. His follow-up album I actually really like and I much prefer. So I know
Okay.
some people are like they would call that a 0 out of 10 album. It's not a lot of love for that one, but I actually really like it. But there we go. But yeah, this one 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, I think we're pretty. I do not have a physical copy of Vince's second album.
Mm.
So I am on the lookout for that. But yeah, man, I think I'm surprised because I kind of thought that you were gonna enjoy this album a good amount, and
Yeah, yeah,
so we're actually kind of the same here. So I'm
yeah,
surprised. I'm
yeah.
surprised. So
All
cool,
right,
very cool.
move on to Crew, eh?
Yeah, let's do it. So we got Motley Crue, 1994. So this comes out pretty much exactly a year later in 94, March, I believe. It does uh go gold in America. And that's and Japan. And that's one thing I forgot to say about Vince Neil's Exposed. It did go gold in Japan, but not in the
Okay.
States. And it did, I think, reach 13, if I'm not mistaken, on the Billboard charts.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
it did have a little bit of a little bit of a run for being 1993.
Mm.
But yeah, so here with Motley Crue, it reached number 7, if I'm not mistaken, in the top 200 Billboard charts. So, and just for a little bit of context here, like we did with Exposed, it's 1994. You're way out in left field as far as music. Hair metal is pretty much non-existent.
Mm.
You do have a couple good releases here, like Cinderella Still Climbing,
Mm.
Seventh Sign, Yngwie Malmsteen. Man, it's few and far in
Mm.
between. Bust the Nut with Tesla.
Mm.
I guess you could
Mm.
throw in Savage's Handful of Rain, which
Mm.
isn't hair metal, but I mean it's
Mm.
still very uh 80s
Yeah,
still.
yeah.
But yeah, man, it's not much going on. Goddard Dial Hard, which I think is
Mm.
easily the probably the best album of 1994 for hair
Mm.
metal as far as
Mm.
hair metal goes. So you're really thin here, and
Mm.
but to me though, you had John Corabi, like we said, came over from the Scream. Nikki Sixx enjoyed his album from the Scream, and they exchanged numbers. And when Vince ended up leaving, John Corabi kind of slid in, tried out, and they apparently went for it. So they did go over to Elektra at this point here, and obviously they did have Decade of Decadence come out really before this, 3 years before, and then Dr. Feelgood as the actual album beforehand. So the singles off this album here, you have Hooligan's Holiday and Misunderstood, which is a little bit like a ballad, like a mixture of a ballad and just a hard rocker. But yeah, I think, to me though, if people, anyone that's watching this that has followed me the past few years, know that I absolutely love this album. This is one of my favorite Motley Crue albums in general. I'm gonna have a couple good things to say about this.
Mhm.
One, I just love John Corabi. Just number
Mhm.
one, because I love the Scream album, like, and I
Mm.
just love most of John Corabi's work anyway, and no exception here with 1994 Motley Crue. But I think with this, yes, if you're expecting a glam or your normal Motley Crue, you're not really gonna get it. But if you're just a fan of hard rock in general, because I don't really think they necessarily went grunge here either, or are alternative, because
Mm.
you still get great solos, you still get some of the best guitar work ever from Mick on
Mm.
this album. And I think John Corabi helps out with that a little bit. It
Mm.
kind of gives Mick a little bit of more free range to do some things, because instead of just worrying on doing all the guitar parts, John Corabi can come in and help out a little bit on the rhythm. So that helps so much as well. And then also John Corabi can write a song as well,
Mm.
unlike Vince.
Mm.
Vince struggles with writing lyrics. So that only helps. I think this is kind of like a well-rounded album. I mean, you do have 12 songs on this album, so I would probably say you get rid of 1 or 2. Now, I
Yeah.
can listen to this album the whole way through without any problem, but I would probably say you could probably throw off, like, Dropping Like Flies, the 11th track, or Welcome to the Numb, the 9th track. You could probably throw those off and have an outstanding 10-track album here, especially for 1994, all things considering. But yeah, like, I think, Steve, the first 4 songs, basically the first half of this album, more or less, you can't start a better, other than maybe Dial Hard from Goddard. I can't think of any other album from 1994, or even hell, even a Motley Crue album that has a stronger first 4 songs on an album here. It's amazing. Power of the Music, Uncle Jack, Hooligan's Holiday, and Misunderstood. And then the 5th track would be Love Shine, which is a total, like, deviant, like kind of like a little bit of an outlier on this album, music style wise, sound wise. But I like it. I like it a lot. And that's another thing. I think the first 4 songs, sure, you could argue that they kind of sound similar, to the point to where, like, yeah, you're just a heavy, crunchy riff, kind of
Mm.
like slow, mid-tempo type stuff.
Mm.
But I think it sounds really good, and I can overlook that, and because they're well-written songs as well, and it's not just like a bore. And because I think that's what some people would throw that as the negative. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
boring mid-tempo, but I disagree with that
Yeah. I think
wholeheartedly.
they found the template for a great song, and they just said like, let's do that again. Let's do that again. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I would say, I mean, they're great songs. Maybe throw like one of the first three somewhere else on the album. Maybe that might cure that a little bit. But to me, though, that you're just splitting hairs at this point when you're talking about that. But I think the production's fine. Nothing to hate or love necessarily. And Smoke the Sky, strangely enough, was a video single. Which to me is an okay song. Nothing hateful, nothing great, but it goes back to that your more Motley Crue-ish type lyric, because Motley Crue got real serious on this album here as well, and with the writing and the music style. So, man, I even heard Nikki Sixx say one time that this is kind of like his Beatles type effort. Just kind of like I guess maybe like the variety on this album, like what the seriousness maybe, or just kind of like I forget exactly like the context of how he said that, but if that makes sense, because it's totally different from everything that Motley Crue done since and beforehand. So, Steve, for me, the great guitar work, great drumming. The drums sound good. The drums sound really good. That's I almost forgot to say that. Like Tommy Lee, yeah, you could say he's one of the best drummers in rock and metal, and some people say, hey, he ain't that good. I'm kind of like in the middle there with that. Like, yeah, I could live with him. I could live without him. So, but he sounds great on this album. I think he really shines here. I think everyone really shines on this album, and I absolutely love it. It did go gold. I can't remember if I said that in the U.S., but I think it well deservedly went gold, and that's a hard thing to do for even one of the best hair metal bands that came out of the 80s to go gold. Poison did it in 93 with Native Tongue, but there isn't much that went gold after 92 for hair metal. So that's quite an achievement, and I don't get the hate.
Can I just stop you there? Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you're saying, just about it going gold. I agree with what you're saying. It's an achievement, but I don't know how these things work. But I kind of have a feeling those big bands, they almost ship gold. Do you know what I mean? Like, because this album was everywhere, right? So
yeah,
you know what I mean.
The only thing I would say to that is I would agree if it was, say, 92, 91, somewhere around in that general, like when it's fading out. 94, you will get caught in the streets and beat. That's basically if you say you like Motley Crue or hair metal or anything like that. Now I wasn't I was only 4 years old or 2 years old in 94. So I can't say for certain that would have happened. But what people explain of that time, that's kind of like what it felt like in I guess revisionist history. So
yeah. No, I will say though, even though it was 94, and like you say, yeah, hair metal was not in at all. But of course, this doesn't sound really like a hair metal album. But of course, it's Motley Crue, who are like the godfathers of it. So, but I do remember it was like everywhere. The thing I also remember is like a few months later finding it in the $2 bins and things like that, cutouts and So but and the thing is too, over time, this album is critically acclaimed, right? It's just taken a little bit of time for people to go, actually, that's a really good album, and now people love it, and I'm sure it is gold. Legitimately, people want to buy it.
So just I'll finish up here.
Yeah.
Some of the songs that like two songs I absolutely love on this album is Till Death Do Us Part. I think that's probably my favorite song on there's crunchy riffs all around. And I mean, as big as Mick Mars is, like as well thought of as Mick Mars is, somewhat underrated. I don't know if underrated's the right word, but like maybe overlooked slightly. But like I think he shines here on this album. He gets the work. He just freelances a little bit. He does what he does. And then I absolutely like the slower song to finish off the album, Drift Away. That's a great slow song. Slower mid-tempo song, a little bit like a ballad, I guess. But man, Steve, I dig this album. I give it an easy 8 out of 10 for me. It's certainly a top 3, if not higher, Motley Crue album for me.
Okay. Wow. All right.
Yeah, I know that's strange, right? That's strange. I don't think you were expecting me to say that, but
no, I was expecting kind of the opposite, but there we go. No, it's all good. Actually, to be honest with you, as you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're saying basically everything I'm about to say. So just what he said is kind of like almost like what I could say, even down to the songs that you like and everything like that. But yeah, just before I start, so I've got the Crucial Crew, and mine's in red,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and it's actually got, I think because it's Crucial Crew, it got, this is a reissue, so it's got 3 extra tracks on it. So has yours just got the
Oh,
12, has it?
yes. Yep, just the
Yeah,
12.
yeah. So because they also released something called Quaternary as well,
Yes.
which has got like 4 songs. I think each band member, well, maybe it's 5 songs actually. Each band member contributed 1 song, and then they also did 1 song altogether.
Yeah,
I
yep.
think that's how it works. I don't have it, but it's got Baby Kills from Quaternary on this, and it's got Living in the Know and Hypnotized, which is sort of like, I guess, outtakes or whatever.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think Planet Boom was the other. I think that was the Tommy Lee song, right?
yeah, that's from Quaternary. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So they had lots of material, I guess, to choose from. Yeah, interesting yesterday because I was playing the Vince Neil first, and then I'm playing the Motley Crue, and the first thing that hits me is actually the production. It's like this sounds like more powerful. Not that, like we talked about, nothing wrong with the production, but Ron Neverson's kind of known for like very clean sound, very commercial. This is a bit dirtier, but still like, wow, sounds powerful, sounds good.
Right.
It sounds,
Did he
this
do
sounds like,
Dr. Feelgood?
what's it?
Did
Yeah, he
he do
did do
Dr.
Dr. Phil.
Feel?
Yeah, he did.
Okay,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, Bob Rock. Yeah, he did Dr. Feelgood. Of course, he's just come off huge sales with Metallica's album. So,
Right.
yeah, yeah, it just sounds amazing. The production fits the music really good because, like you
I
said,
agree.
it's powerful. It's just good heavy rock. Yeah, it's metal-ish, if you know what I mean. Like it's not heavy metal, right? But it's
But
heavy
it is their heaviest album, I
in
would
some ways.
say.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In some ways it is, but it doesn't sound like 80s metal, like what we
Right.
called metal back in the 80s, which was a lot of that sort of Motley Crue type sound.
Hmm.
It's like a sort of a heavy sort of classic rock kind of sound, updated, for the 90s kind of thing. Um, so, and what gets me is I didn't think Motley Crue were capable of this. I just thought they can do the party songs. Yeah, they can come up with some catchy stuff, great songs. But I didn't think
Hmm.
they were actually capable of doing like a mature album, like and the kind of sophisticated. It's like,
I
yeah,
agree.
I was very pleasantly surprised. I will say as well though, initially when I played it, I was like, oh, okay, this wasn't what I was expecting. I was kind of wanting, well, I'm not saying I necessarily want to shout at the devil, but some of the songs off Dr. Feelgood that I really liked, I was sort of maybe hoping for something like Wildside, like that was kind of what I was expecting and hoping for. But at the same time, it grew on me, and that's how sometimes you get an album, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not sure, and then you just keep playing it, and it's like, oh, actually, I love this. You know what I mean? It just gets
Yeah.
in your head eventually. Sometimes some of the better albums, those ones you got to work on a little bit, you got to play a little bit. So,
Yeah.
um,
I
and
agree.
kind of similar to the Vince one, so it didn't hit me straight away, but the difference is I kept playing it, and it still wasn't quite doing it for me. Well, this one, I'm starting to, power to the music, exactly like what you said. Those first 4 songs, like, forget about it. It's already a great album, even if the rest kind of, aren't that great. Because those first
Right.
four are so strong. Like we talked about,
Hmm.
they almost had a template here, especially on those first 3 songs. They
Yeah.
do sound quite similar, but man, they are great songs. Hooligan's Holiday was the first single. They've just got a great groove. Yeah, it's just that's a good song. Hooligan's Holiday. Again, I don't know. Like, is it a single though? Like, it's a great song, but I don't know. Is it going to be a hit? Doesn't it have hit potential? I don't know.
I mean,
Um,
what would be the single
yeah,
here that you would choose? Like
yeah.
that's tough.
Yeah, because even Misunderstood, a good song, but it's like nearly 7 minutes long. I mean, I don't know if there's an edited version or something.
Yeah, that and the wrong timing too
Yeah,
for it to succeed
yeah.
in 94. Like in 91, sure, I would agree with
Mm,
you. That would probably be a hit. But
mm.
94, not early 95 maybe. Yeah, I think that then again, they could have released literally the best song ever. And in 94,
Yeah,
95, no one would have
that's right.
listened to it.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
So,
No, that's right. Yeah. No. So yeah, first of all, like you said, well, we're totally on the same page there. I think it dips a little bit here. Love Shine. It's like a short sort of. It's almost like another ballad, and it follows Misunderstood. And I think they could have changed the sequence, the song sequence on that one, because it's like a ballad after a ballad, or slow song after slow song.
right.
Yeah.
Can't
Poison.
argue. Can't argue with
Yeah.
that.
Poison Apples and Hammered are they're okay, but they're quite a little bit unmemorable for me. Hammered's like over 5 minutes long. I think just to be a little bit critical, they do have a lot of 5 minute plus songs on this album,
Sure
and
do. Yeah.
maybe they
Yep.
could have just shortened it down a little bit. And saying that, you talked about the song "Till Death Do Us Part." Might be my favorite song on the album as well. What a killer riff, powerful vocals, and that's actually 6 minutes long, but I don't mind because that's such a
Yeah.
great song. And actually, I remember when just before this album came out, they were talking about they had an interview with the guys. And they were talking, how much they love John Corabi, and he's like the perfect fit for the band, and that they were going to call the album "Till Death Do Us Part." And
Yes.
I was thinking, oh wow, they love each other so much that like they're going to stay
Or
together
were,
until they die.
or were they talking about Vince still? Still,
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
Who
because they
who
like,
knows? Who honestly
yeah,
knows?
yeah. I mean, so yeah, I mean, because they did continue working with John Corabi on the next album as well, didn't they?
Yes.
Um,
Generation Swine.
yeah, so he was going to be on the album, but yeah, then
He
obviously
he
things.
technically is on
Yeah.
one of the songs on Generation Swine. Let Us Pray.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
He has backing vocals on that song. So technically he is on that song or on that
Mm,
album.
mm,
But
mm,
and I actually kind of think that might be the one of the better songs on Generation Swine too.
mm,
So
mm,
I don't know if that's a coincidence or what
mm,
exactly is going on here. But
mm.
yeah, Steve, I think we're pretty much in line here.
Yeah, well, we are. The only thing I disagree with you, because we're pretty much saying
Yeah.
exactly the same stuff. I heard you say, "Oh, maybe dropping like flies." No way. You got to keep that one. Got to keep that
Okay.
one. That's the other song I quite like.
Okay.
It's another long one, but really like the starting riff on that one. It's quite a good heavy song. So, yeah. But there are songs, "Smoke the Sky" is good as well. I like that one. It's heavy, probably one of the heaviest songs
Yeah.
on the album. And that's a nice sort of compact 3 minute, 3 minutes long. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to go. Perhaps not quite as high as you, but I'm going to go 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10.
Okay. That's fair. That's quite fair because I mean I agree with you. With like you could have took one song out of here at least. I think
Yeah,
that could be a unanimous decision. At least one song out of here, and I think it would have been a
maybe
lot
shorten some of
stronger.
the songs a little bit as well. Maybe if just cut them down a little bit. Quite a
Possibly,
long album.
yeah. But man, I
Mm,
like I said, I think this is probably one of my favorite Motley Crue. And to your
mm,
point, I think that's why I love it so much is because it's so different from everything that they've done
mm,
since and before here. Because you get a serious Motley Crue, and like, don't get me wrong, when I was young, I loved Motley Crue. Motley Crue was one of my favorite bands when I was a teenager.
mm,
But like, as the deeper you get into the hair metal genre and like all the different subgenres and such, my I'm gonna say Motley Crue's overrated. I rarely visit them anymore, but like
mm.
Motley Crue 94 is like a breath of fresh air for me, and which is very strange. I know a lot of people. I might be like getting throwing some hair metal holy water on me here after this episode. But man, like Motley Crue, I think whenever usually a song comes on, like I'm not a fan of the first album.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I could listen to the whole thing,
Mm.
but I don't get
Mm.
the number one ranking of it in
Mm.
like their discography. I don't get that.
Yeah,
Maybe a little too
it's quite
punkish.
a different sound,
It is.
production,
It
everything.
is.
Yeah. Mm.
But to me though, Motley Crue 94 is right up there with Shout Out the Devil for me. And I'll leave it at that. So
Great. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. So there we go. So there's our discussion. There's our review. I think we've got a winner. Is that correct, Trevor? We're going to go with the Crew. We don't need to do the
94.
maths too much. It's pretty obvious. But I think you gave it 8. I gave it 7. So that's 15 out of 20.
15.
Yeah. And Vince, we'll say you gave it 5.5 as well, because you were like between 5 and 6. So a couple 5.5s. I'll do my math. That's 11. So 11 out of 20. So, and I think, I think that's a pretty fair reflection of the difference in quality, 3 or 4 points sort of thing in it. But interesting that, the Crew did actually do a pretty good album here, but it didn't meet sales expectations. But I think
just the wrong time.
Yeah. Well, Vince puts out the album that probably most people were expecting, and that also didn't meet sales expectations. So you just couldn't really win, like you say. You've got that hair metal tag on you, Vince Neil, it's Motley Crue. It's like, yeah. Unless it's grunge, it's or alternative or whatever. The in sound at the time, it's probably not gonna. It's just not going to get the airplay. MTV probably may have played it a little bit, but didn't give it the push that they were giving those kind of bands in the 80s. So. Be nice if they put this out on vinyl. It is on vinyl, but you got to pay like $1 million for it. So be nice because they have been Motley Crue do reissue albums, but for whatever reason, I think they kind of want to forget this one even happened or existed today. But
and that's so crazy. I kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier. Nikki Sixx, he loved this album when it was out.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone loved it when it was out. Oh man, was it what everyone else loves it now?
Yeah.
And oh no, we're better than that. Just go listen to Generation Swine again.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks for joining me today, Trevor. It's been a good chat.
Of course, anytime, brother.
Thank you. And feel free to leave your comment. What do you think? What's your favorite? Because I've done a poll on my channel. I only just started it yesterday, so it's only had a short period of time for people to do votes. I think it's got only got about 9 votes on it so far, and one of them's mine. But and it's actually close. So 56% for Crew, 44% for Vince. So there is some love for that Vince album, and some people do prefer the Vince album over the Crew album, and I totally get it because it's more of a hair metal. I hate to use that term, but it's more that 80s. It's more the Motley Crue sound, isn't it? So perhaps if you love that sound, that is the album you go for. And I certainly know there are people who go, "Oh, this album, no, they should have called the band a different name. This is not Motley Crue." And that's a fair point as well, right? Maybe they should have. Maybe they should have changed the band name.
It is a fair point. I mean, they wouldn't have got slapped down just by your average music listener at the time. I think that's a very fair point.
Yeah. I mean, what would have been cool if they called themselves something different? Then they could have gone and done another album, right? They could still have kept the Crew going and go, we're going to do the Karobi Crew, whatever they want to call themselves. You know what I mean?
They'll call themselves Generation Swine. Then,
Swine, yeah, fantastic name. Yeah, exactly. We're going to do a Generation Swine album now, and it didn't. They wouldn't have. Yeah. So, but anyway, okay. Well, thanks again, Trevor. Hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe if you haven't, and don't forget go check out Trevor's channel if you haven't already. Great content there. All right.
Well, thanks so much, Steve.
All right. See ya.